Welcome to the 700 Club. Congress is on the verge of passing a budget deal reached with President Trump. It's already been approved by the House, and it goes to the Senate this week.
Fiscal conservatives say the bill adds nearly $2 trillion to the deficit. But despite the objections, the White House and some Republicans say a better deal just wasn't possible. Paul Strand explains.
For all their feuding on other matters, House Democrats and Republicans and the Trump administration have managed to pass a budget deal that puts an end to the era of government shutdowns, at least for 2 years. It heads to the Senate next, where it's expected to pass.
Does the president want the Senate to pass it? And if it does, will he sign this bill?
Yes and yes. Keep in mind, the bill spends more money than the president wanted to spend. There's no question about that.
Critics, though, are blasting the deal for what it adds to spending and the deficit.
We have to start calling these people out for what they are, and what they are fiscal frauds.
Jason Pye of FreedomWorks says he thinks GOP lawmakers and Trump got played.
Certainly members of Congress who I've talked to, conservatives on the House side especially, think the president was getting bad advice and being sold a bill of goods that I think he got kind of pushed into supporting.
For instance, it goes $320 billion above already agreed on spending caps, and it adds more than $1.7 trillion to the already massive deficit. Well, those who helped cobble together this budget buster said its critics can talk a good fight, but that's about all.
You're not going to get a better deal. All those people don't like this deal. They have zero ability to get a better deal.
And President Trump was finding a silver lining in all the extra dollars drenching the Defense Department.
Our military today is more powerful by far than ever before. And 3 years ago, we could not have said that, could we, Mark?
Pye says Republicans can hardly call themselves conservatives when voting for a deal like this.
Republicans run every 2 or 6 years, depending on which chamber they're in, on fiscal responsibility and limited government. We elected them to fight. That's the whole purpose. Republicans, our activists go out and knock on doors and pound pavement and make phone calls for Republicans. They want people who are going to go fight.
Trump forces and some congressional Republicans think a huge fight over the budget could have led to a bruising battle that might have seriously wounded the GOP headed into a crucial election year. But appearing on Faith Nation, the Heritage Foundation's Romina Bacha scalded these present-day deal makers.
It's irresponsible, reckless, and frankly immoral to put so much debt on the next generation.
You have to start making these tough choices at some point in time. If not now, when?
Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Now, let me echo that. If not now, when? If we don't start getting our spending under control and get a balanced budget, we're on a road to ruin. I mean, you can literally start seeing our currency being devalued. You can start seeing default at the federal level on our bonds. I mean, at what point do you reach a tipping point? We used to think it was 20 trillion. Well, now it's going to be 22 trillion, and it's not going to take long before it's 30 trillion. You go back in time, there was an effort to have a balanced budget amendment that would force Congress into sound fiscal policy. And that was defeated because, well, we need to have emergency powers in the event of war and that kind of thing. Well, back then, the entire federal deficit was $450 billion. Well, okay, now it's 20 trillion. And where do we go with this? How do you pay that off? And if you continue to have these deficits, at some point in time, you run out. And when you run out, well, then there's a real big cliff you're looking at. And this isn't something that will be a minor panic. This will be a worldwide panic, a very crowded room looking for some very narrow exits, and what's safe at that point. This is horrific. And we're spending our time arguing who's the most racist or who has the worst inner city. And we should be spending our time, how do we effectively govern ourselves? This is a big deal, and to say, you know, let's just kick this can down the road, we can't do it because we're kicking it not just to the next generation, and not to the generation after that. It's our children's children's children. They're going to be paying for this. This is a horrible thing that we're doing, and I underline, it's immoral to have your great-grandchildren pay your debts. Well, in other news, authorities are looking for a motive after a gunman opened fire at an outdoor festival in California yesterday. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. And 3 people died when that gunman opened fire at the annual Garlic Festival in Gilroy, California last night.
He just shoot once and then he stopped and then he just started shooting repeatedly.
It just started popping off like fireworks. It sounded like firecrackers. That's what I thought it was. I had no idea until he grabbed me and he started pulling me and telling me that's gunfire. We need to get out of here, go.
People fled in panic at the sound of the shots. Police responded immediately and opened fire, killing the attacker within minutes. At least 11 people were wounded, some critically. Among the dead is a 6-year-old boy. So far, little is known about the shooter or his motives. Police are searching for a possible second suspect. Well, the Supreme Court says the Trump administration can use Pentagon funds to build parts of the border wall, even as the case carries on in an appeals court. The justices ruling 5-4 to overturn a lower court ruling blocking the transfer of $2.5 billion meant for drug interdiction, but tapped by the administration after President Trump declared a national emergency. The money will be used to build more than 100 miles of wall on the southern border. The administration, though, is in another legal battle over immigration, this one related to its policy limiting asylum applications. A new rule requires people to seek asylum in the country through which they first pass. In an exclusive interview with CBN News reporter Jennifer Wishon, Acting Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Ken Cuccinelli said a backlog of nearly 800,000 asylum cases is swamping the system.
A lot of Americans don't know that our southern border, legal or illegal people coming across, have been turned into a toll booth by the most evil, vicious, awful people in the Western Hemisphere, the drug cartels in northern Mexico. Even when they make large-scale deals to smuggle people up from the Northern Triangle, they'll get right to the end of their journey, not a safe or healthy journey, and lo and behold, the drug cartel will hit them up for more money.
Cuccinelli adding the president's new rule could save lives. Well, the director of national intelligence, Dan Coats, is leaving his post, announcing Sunday that he's stepping down next month. The president says he'll nominate Texas Republican Congressman John Ratcliffe to take his place. Coats and the president had a tense relationship with public disagreements over Russia and North Korea. Well, another Twitter war between the president and a member of Congress this weekend. This after the president criticized Maryland Representative Elijah Cummings, accusing him of neglecting his Baltimore district. Amber Strong has more of the story from Washington.
The president and his aides are fending off new accusations of racism after a series of tweets aimed at African-American Congressman Elijah Cummings and the majority black city of Baltimore. There is nothing racist in stating plainly what most people already know, that Elijah Cummings has done a terrible job for the people of his district. That's one of more than a dozen tweets the president fired off over the weekend. Rep. Elijah Cummings has been a brutal bully, shouting and screaming at the great men and women of Border Patrol. Cumming District is a disgusting rat and rodent-infested mess. If he spent more time in Baltimore, maybe he could clean up this very dangerous and filthy place. No human being would want to live there. Analysts believe the president's ire was sparked by a combination of Democrats' ongoing investigations and a Fox News appearance by African-American conservative strategist Kimberly Klacik, pointing out deplorable conditions and trash plaguing Baltimore. Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney says the president is just defending his administration after Cummings' confrontation with DHS Secretary Kevin McAleenan about migrant facilities.
Mr. Cummings saying that children were sleeping or sitting in their own feces. That's not right. It's not accurate. And when the president hears lies like that, he is going to fight back. That if Adam Schiff had said the same thing about the border, that the president would be attacking Adam Schiff in the exact same way today.
But the city of Baltimore is more than 60% black. The president's critics say they've heard it all before.
This president has shown us time and time again, from the way that he started his campaign to the comments about that Mexican-American judge during the campaign, to his failure to immediately condemn white supremacists in Charlottesville in 2018. There's a pattern here.
He continues to say things about American cities all across this country. I mean, look, our president has a hate agenda.
Republican Congressman Will Hurd believes tweets at Cummings are different than the previous ones against Representative Rashida Tlaib and 3 other Democratic congresswomen.
You condemned the go back tweets, but you do not condemn these tweets by the president? I wouldn't be doing those, right? I wouldn't be tweeting this way, but I think they are different.
The Baltimore Sun also fiercely defending the congressman, and Cummings vowing he won't back down. It is my constitutional duty to conduct oversight of the executive branch, but it is my moral duty to fight for my constituents. As chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Cummings oversees several investigations into the president and the administration. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Amber. Iran says a European fleet in the Persian Gulf would be a provocative and hostile act. This as a second British warship arrived in the Gulf to protect British-flagged tankers. The UK is seeking to build a European coalition after Iran seized one of its oil tankers last week in the Strait of Hormuz. The Islamic regime says that action was in retaliation for the UK seizing an Iranian tanker, which allegedly was violating international sanctions by carrying oil to Syria. Well, the United States and Israel successfully tested a new missile defense system Sunday. As Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports, it follows Iran's test of a medium-range ballistic missile last week.
Historic and unprecedented. That's what the U.S. and Israel are calling the test results of the Arrow 3 weapon system. U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman joined Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the weekly cabinet meeting. Netanyahu addressed what he called the recent pioneering secret experiments.
They were successful beyond any imagination. The Arrow 3, with complete success, intercepted ballistic missiles beyond the atmosphere at unprecedented altitudes and speeds. The execution was perfect, all precise hits.
The results were extraordinary. We're very proud of our partnership with the State of Israel, the funding that we provided for this, the technical expertise that we added.
The test comes at a time of growing tension between the U.S., Britain, and Iran. The Arrow weapon system was tested against targets that behave like the ballistic missiles Iran is developing.
Today, Israel has the ability to act against ballistic missiles that could be launched against us from Iran or anywhere else. This is a great achievement for the security of Israel. All our enemies should know that we will overcome them in both defense and offense.
Israel transported and deployed the Arrow 3 system to Alaska to test capabilities that could not be tested in Israel. 10 years in the making, the Arrow 3 ballistic missile defense system is designed to intercept ballistic missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere, like intercontinental ballistic missiles. The test also proved the Arrow 3 can operate together with the U.S. radar system. The Arrow 3 is the highest level of Israel's 4-tier missile defense system. That includes the Iron Dome, David Sling, and the Arrow 2 weapon systems. Besides the successful test of the rocket, defense officials, Netanyahu and Friedman hailed a close cooperation and strategic partnership between the U.S. and Israel.
This is an extraordinary and an unprecedented example of the cooperation between our two great countries. And from here, may we continue to go upward and onward in making the world a safer place.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Gordon, back to you.
Well, it's an amazing achievement, and it's one that's been elusive for a long time, an effective anti-ballistic missile system, and it's a game changer for security in the Middle East. Iran has been dedicated to developing this kind of missile technology. They also seem to be on a race to develop a nuclear weapon, and their target all along has been Israel. Their second target has been Europe, and their third target has been you and me. When you look at their rhetoric, when they say great Satan, they're talking about us. When they say little Satan, they're talking about Israel. So to have this kind of defensive capability, that if they were to launch a ballistic missile, there would be the capability of taking it down. That is wonderful, and a wonderful example of how Israel is helping the United States.